This is the Reading Instruction Show. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Andy Johnson. The topic of today's podcast is, what in the heck is structured literacy? What does it look like? What specific strategies would we see? If you were to walk into 60 minutes of a structured literacy reading class, what would you see? What behaviors? What strategies? And can you find one legitimate research study, not data, but a research study published in a peer-reviewed academic journal comparing structured literacy to a meaning-based approach or a balanced approach to literacy instruction? These are things we must ask. Structured literacy, is there such a thing as unstructured literacy or chaotic literacy? Is anyone in favor of that? Where did you come up with the term structured literacy? And if it's not structured, what is it? Haphazard literacy? Sporadic literacy? Higgledy-piggledy literacy? Unsystematic literacy? Jumbled literacy? Disorganized literacy? Is anyone in favor of these things? Where did you come up with this term structured literacy? So many questions. Now, when you look online and look in books and videos, you see some typical comparisons of balanced literacy and structured literacy. And these are usually made by science of reading zealots comparing the two, and it's not a very unbiased comparison, but this is what the typical comparison looks like when you read the science of reading people. This is how balanced literacy is portrayed as something evil that's damaging children. And this is how the science of reading zealots typically portray the results of balanced literacy. And teachers of balanced literacy are portrayed thusly. More balanced of literacy teachers, they're evil, they're bad, they're ignorant. We're trying to ruin America, bring down capitalism in America. And this is how and what I'm usually portrayed of, the host of the Reading Instruction Show. I'm a bad person. I'm an ignorant person. And this is what Dr. Ken Goodman, he who shall not be named, is generally portrayed by, and of course by people who have never read any of his work. And this is usually the results of whole language, how it is portrayed. It's a plague, it's a horrible, it's destroying everything. And this is what a typical balanced literacy class looks like, according to the science of reading zealots. Now, descriptions of balanced literacy by the science of reading people are not remotely accurate. Saying it more doesn't make it more true. Saying it louder doesn't make it more true. Emily Hanford is the Tucker Carlson of reading instruction, although she has a much better haircut. It's propaganda not based on truth, but what she is saying is based on a predetermined idea or what she wants to be. Now, this is the typical portrayal of structured literacy by the science of reading zealots. It's all healing. It will fix all the reading problems. If everyone just used structured literacy, we'd be healed. And that's the problem. Typical portrayal, everything that is good, right, and American. Typical portrayal of structured literacy, happy children listening to their children, or listening to their teacher. It's a miracle cure. There's this problem, which there really isn't. But if we all use structured literacy, all our reading problems would be solved. We know the cause of the problem, and it's unstructured literacy, so they say. And of course, whenever there's a bill passed for some structured literacy, something like here in Minnesota, the READ Act, they have lots and lots of happy, smiley children that are all now going to read and be happy. And how could we not support happiness? However, it's a straw man fallacy. Arguing against an untrue version of a good thing, which is balanced literacy, doesn't make the bad thing any better. It just makes the arguer look silly. And that's what the science of reading zealots look like. They look awfully, awfully silly, making these arguments against something that just is not. It's not true. It's not what they are portraying. Dimensions of ignorance. And it's usually the science of reading zealots. It's obviously they have little knowledge about reading, the reading process, reading research, the research process, how you evaluate research, basic human learning, education, teacher, and the nature of science. They use I thinkisms and anecdotal evidence to come to conclusions about things. Structured literacy, not ignorance, but ignorance of ignorance is the death of knowledge. And that's what's happening here in Minnesota with the READ Act, based on absolute ignorance. Instead of calling in literacy experts, they called in Emily Hanford, a radio journalist. It is certain, in any case, that ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. James Baldwin. I would recommend reading his stuff. And these are all the power players here. All people making money. Ignorance. Allied with power. Your ignorance is their power, and they are making lots and lots of money. On the backs of our struggling readers, on the hopes and dreams that parents have for their children, on the taxpayers of Minnesota, these people are making lots and lots and lots of money. And they're laughing all the way to the bank at you. Structured literacy is based on a simple view of reading. Simple Simon met a pieman going to the fair. Simple view of reading says that reading is decoding times language comprehension. That's reading comprehension. You sound out the words, that's what decoding is, and then you listen to it in your head, decoding. Reading is decoding, sounding out words, and that is a simple view of reading. Good for Simple Simon if you're going to meet a pieman, but not good for teaching real kids. Now, I searched a database looking for peer-reviewed journal articles using the search term structured literacy, and I looked for theoretical articles and research articles. And I started in 2000 and up to 2024, so 24, and I came up with eight, that's all I came up with, in peer-reviewed academic journals. And maybe my search engine or my database wasn't very big, but I came up with 8. Now, all of these came from Dyslexia World, and Dyslexia World is a strange place. The laws of physics and science and evidence seem to have different meanings there in Dyslexia World. So what can we deduce then or conclude about structured literacy, all coming from Dyslexia World, and so very few items about structured literacy, academic journal articles in our search engine. You know what I'm saying. All right, so structured literacy, and note that's it's trademarked, is a term created by the International Dyslexia Association. 2016 to help unify the names of research approaches to reading. Researched approaches, interesting. That term is used quite a lot, including Orton-Gillingham, phonics-based reading instruction, systematic reading instruction, and synthetic phonics. Interesting. Institute for Multisensory Education. That's Orton-Gillingham. Interesting. Structured literacy is an approach to teaching oral and written language based on the science of reading, of how kids learn to read. The International Dyslexia Association came up with the term. Okay, they came up with it. Hence, it is trademarked. The term structured literacy is not designed to replace Orton-Gillingham, heaven forbid, or multisensory, or terms in common use. By the way, multisensory teaching. The OG people like to think that this is some secret method that they came up with. All good primary teachers are multi-sensory teachers, using vision, hearing, feeling, instead of just passively looking. It's an umbrella term designed to describe all of the programs that teach reading in essentially the same way, spelling. In our marketing, marketing will help us sell. Marketing, sell. Marketing, sell. Those are key terms here. Key terms. International Dyslexia Association was born in the 1920s with direct roots to Dr. Samuel T. Orton's pioneering studies in the field of reading research and multi-sensory teaching. He was a medical doctor, and he was pioneering all right, but his pioneering was kind of in the wrong direction. He should have stuck to the field of medicine versus reading. His early research was based on eye movement. He noticed that looking at the eyes of struggling readers, he said, oh, the eyes of struggling readers go like this. So we need to develop eye exercises so their eyes go like proficient readers. Well, eye movement was an effect, not a cause of efficient reading. With practice, the eye movement of struggling readers goes from this to that. That's good Dr. Orton there. So, you are doing a lot of research. You belong to the International Dyslexia Association, but you can't get any of your research published in the standard or in the recognized peer-reviewed academic journals. Little problem solving here. What do you do if you can't get your research published in peer-reviewed academic journals? You create your own journals, of course, and that is the Annals of Dyslexia. They created their own academic journal. Dyslexia World exists to sell Orton Gillingham. Make no bones about that. What is the cost? $5,000 to $10,000. And there's an application fee. Interesting. Well, I went online. $1,000 for a course, and that's a 30-hour course. Someone's making the green stuff there. And the online academy, look at all this stuff and how much money they are making off of you. Because it's multi-sensory and it's research-based. But it's actually not research-based. It's actually not. And all the related products, they're making money. Look at that. Lots and lots of money. Lots and lots. And they are laughing all the way to the bank. They're laughing at you. They're laughing at the toadies in the Minnesota State Legislature who passed this bill to make them wealthy. Now, of course, you could buy my books. They're published in black and white to keep the price as low as possible. $35. You could pay $5,000 or $10,000. Think how many books you could buy. Good reading instruction starts not with a system or a product. It starts with understanding the reading process, how learners read the process. It starts with understanding. When you have knowledge of reading and the reading process, you don't need any for-profit system. You can create your own instruction. But let's do a little unpackerating here about this whole structured literacy thing. Adopted by the International Dyslexia Association to refer to many programs, Orton Gillingham, that teach reading by following the evidence and research behind the science of reading. Structured literacy are beneficial for all students and essential for students who struggle with reading. That's what Orton Gillingham says. Okay, notice that link between the International Dyslexia Association and Orton Gillingham, who's making lots of money. So, it was adopted by the International, IDA and Orton Gillingham, the evidence and the research. And I always like those terms. The. What is the? Is there a canon of the out there? What research specifically? You can't just say the research shows or scientists show or scientists approve. What did the research say exactly? We must be good consumers of educational research. We can't just let the little owls at Gorton Gillingham say research, research. You can't just use that term. And when you say research, did the research compare Orton Gillingham to a balanced approach? Or did it compare Orton Gillingham to nothing or to something? What did the research compare it to? Did the research examine the effectiveness of Orton Gillingham? Did the research get published in a peer-reviewed academic journal? Or is the research just some random data that you collected? Data is different from research. Did you use peer-reviewed research comparing Orton Gillingham or structured literacy to a similar group receiving similar amounts of balanced literacy instruction, meaning-based literacy instruction, or whole language instruction, provided by teachers of similar experience and expertise? Now, the typical experiment goes like this. And the science of reading is all about this typical controlled experimental study. That's what they think we should use. Okay? If you're going to use that, let's use it for everything. Did you have a measure? Did you have two groups that were similar in all ways, in makeup, in education, in background? Were they two similar groups? Was it a large enough sample size? Was it experimental or quasi-experimental? Did you provide similar treatment? The treatment was similar, all except for one variable. And was it taught by expert teachers in both treatment groups? Now, the typical research, in quotes, and I've read some of these in the Annals of Dyslexia, they'll have their very special treatment that gets something by trained research assistants, and then they'll have nothing, which is the control group. They'll have a pre-measure and a post-measure. The group that got something scored higher in measures of something than the group that got nothing. If you teach something, they're going to score higher on measures of that. That does not mean they're going to be better readers at the end. Something is usually better than nothing. If you have a treatment group, you give them lots of direct instruction with phonics, they're going to score higher on measures of phonics. That does not mean they're better able to read. That does not mean that they are better able to read than someone who was immersed in a balanced approach to literacy instruction. So, are you saying that Orton Gillingham has been compared to a balanced literacy approach in a controlled experimental study? Are you saying Orton Gillingham is beneficial for all students? Are you really saying that? And here's the big one. Are you defining reading as simply decoding or creating meaning with print? There's a difference. There is a difference between decoding and creating meaning with print. Have you ever seen an individual word floating in space without any context at all? We always see words in the context of something. Reading is not simply decoding. Reading is creating meaning with print. We use context. Now, structured literacy is an approach that provides a framework to include both the principles, how we should teach, what do you know about principles, and the elements, what we should teach, that are aligned to the knowledge and practice standards. Teaching whole word memorization is limited, and learning phonics empower students with an exponential effect. Let's unpack knowledge and practice standards. Two bits of nonsense there. Knowledge and practice standards, this was written by the IDA, International Dyslexia Association. So they're referencing themselves to prove themselves. That's like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. That doesn't happen. You can't lift yourself up in the air by pulling your own bootstraps. And whole word memorization. For God's sakes, who teaches whole word memorization? That's another straw person. Straw man. Both whole word and whole language have the word whole in them, but that doesn't mean they're the same. That's why, science of reading people, you should read things instead of decode things, because you read for meaning. And you would realize that I don't know of anyone who teaches whole word memorization. Once upon a time that may have been a thing, but that is not a thing and hasn't been a thing for years. So these are the elements of structured literacy. Sounds, phonemic awareness. Sound symbol association, putting letters to sounds. Syllable instruction, I don't know why that is. I have seen no research that shows that syllable instruction, other than just some very basic stuff at kindergarten, is effective. Morphology, that means meaningful word parts. Syntax, that's grammar or word order. And semantics, that's word meaning or vocabulary. Everybody believes that these things are necessary. Hello? That's not structured literacy, but it's far from sufficient. And therein lies the deficit of this argument. These things are necessary, but far from sufficient, and the science of reading zealots say this is all that reading instruction should be. Science of reading identifies 5 essential components. Absolutely, but duh! Everyone believes these things are important. These things came from the National Reading Panel, which found nothing new. These things are necessary, but far from sufficient. But the science of reading zealots say this is all that should be. Now, these are the things that are included in a meaning-based, balanced approach to literacy. 10 plus 1. These are the things included in a structured literacy program. Necessary, but far from sufficient. In the same way, activities to develop word recognition. A balanced literacy has these types of activities. Structured has 1, phonics and word work. Interesting. What about word identification? And word identification is different from word recognition. Balanced literacy teaches 4 ways to recognize words. Science of reading, 1. 4 is more than 1. Having 4 strategies is better than having 1 strategy. Don't take my word for it. It's math. 4 is more than 1. Now, according to the International Dyslexia Association, structured literacy includes systematic, cumulative, explicit, sequential, multimodal, and diagnostic features. Duh! Everyone agrees with that. Well, duh, except for the sequential part. But you're putting these words out there like they're new to you. Like you invented these words. A balanced approach to reading instruction is systematic. It's cumulative. It's explicit. It's multimodal. And it's found within the context of authentic literacy instruction. Not only is it multimodal, it's mega multimodal, in that it includes vision, hearing, feeling, but emoting, social context. Skills are taught as students are ready or need them, not sequentially. All human beings are not the same. We do not learn in a predetermined order. So in a balanced approach to literacy, teachers are looking at their students to see what they need. And diagnosis does not include some cockamamie test that describes how far a kid is away from average. Diagnosis includes authentic reading assessment as well as standardized test data. That's balanced approach. Now, International Dyslexia Association say skills are taught in a direct way in a logical order. Well, there's an order, and it could be direct, but it's not a logical order. Human beings do not learn this way in a sequence like that. We recognize patterns, but we don't learn in this order, and this is the way they're generally taught. This is a common scope in sequence. Start with the consonants, short, long, blends, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That makes sense to a logical mind, but that is not how human beings learn. Words are not meaningless symbols floating in space that we memorize. We don't memorize patterns. We don't memorize words as a series of meaningless patterns. Meaning of the word comes before pattern recognition. Yes, pattern recognition is a part of reading and recognizing words, but meaning comes first. The patterns mean something. Words are always found in some context, on a label, on a sign, or in a sentence. We don't recognize meaningless patterns floating in space. Now, this whole thing about orthographic mapping, this describes how words are stored in long-term memory. And the theory behind this is words are stored according to pattern. And orthographic mapping may be a thing, letter patterns, but semantic mapping is much more of a thing. Meaning, yes, we may have some weak memory of letter patterns, absolutely, but semantic mapping is much more powerful, meaning that words are stored in our head in long-term memory based on how close they associated with similar concepts. When we hear the word red, we think of red things. We don't think of short E words. Words are stored by how closely they associate with related things. This study, Damasio, Grabowski, Trano, human brain has 3 levels of representation for word knowledge. The top level is the conceptual level, the semantic information. That is the most powerful form of word representation. Lexical is the word form and phonological level. Orthographic mapping may be a thing, but semantic mapping is much more of a thing, a semantic network based on ideas. When you hear the word cat, you don't think of short A words or CVC words or AT phonograms. You associate it with cat things. Furry, pet, cat food, paws, kitty. This, the bottom one, is the semantic network. This top one is a orthographic network. Semantic mapping is much more of a thing than orthographic mapping. But this whole orthographic mapping thing, structured literacy, leads to a Humpty Dumptyian approach. Taking all the little pieces, breaking down the complex process of reading into little pieces and putting them back together again, teaching one teeny tiny little piece at a time. So you're teaching the reading puzzle in order by teaching one little puzzle piece at a time. When they master that puzzle piece, then you give them another puzzle piece. Consonant diagraphs, short vowel sounds, vowel consonant D, vowel R. You teach them in this order. Diphthongs, syllable types, spelling rules. Okay. This is based on I thinkisms. You break the complex active reading down into little parts, and then you teach one little part at a time, starting from the simple to the complex. That's just not how human beings. We do not learn from part to whole. We learn best from whole to part. Does some learning take place this way? Yes, but not nearly as effectively as whole to part. So 7 things to consider here. First, during reading, your brain uses as few letter clues as possible to recognize words. We don't read letter by letter in a serial fashion. It would take far too long, too much space in working memory. We use minimal letter clues, and our eyes do not stop on every word. You didn't perceive each of the letters here. Proficient readers look at only 60% of the words on the page. Don't believe me? Look at the eye movement research. 60%. Proficient readers often insert words that are semantically or syntactically correct. Meaning is retained. That means you're creating meaning. You're reading at deep level versus surface structure. More nerve fibers go from the cortex to the thalamus than the thalamus to the cortex, almost 10 to 1. That means that more information is flowing down than flowing from the page up. And the information in the cortex is used to direct the eyes during reading. And vowels are not all that important. You'll have your scope and sequence chart with diagraphs and this and that. All the vowels here have been removed except for the initial vowels. Most people can still read this just fine. Once upon a time, there was a handsome prince. So how important are vowels in the first place? Now here's a sentence in which it's about a black bear. All the consonants have been removed. Can anyone tell me what it is? Those oh so very consonants. Here's one with all the vowels removed. Most of us could get a semblance of what that means. The importance of vowels is overestimated. Untruth commonly repeated. A balanced approach to literacy instruction does not include direct, systematic, and explicit phonics instruction. Balanced literacy is not a singular approach. Skills-based instruction must be balanced with experiences to practice these skills in an authentic reading and writing context. That's what balanced is. And it's a sliding continuum. One size does not fit all. There's simply a balance between skills instruction and using those skills in authentic reading context. And it looks a little different in every classroom. But it says reading should have a proper balance of all these things. Comprehension, fluency, word identification, word recognition, phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, reading practice, social interaction, and writing. Balance. A balance. Direct instruction is used to teach these things very explicitly. Again, meaning-based, structured. Balanced, structured. This has been the Reading Instruction Show.